Greetings, my beautiful lovelies. It's Emmy. How are you? It's great to see you and welcome back to my kitchen. Today, I'm going to be making bread out of rice. And when I say rice, I mean, regular old rice, like the starch that you have with your stew or topped with natto, that rice. We're going to be taking dried rice and transforming it into bread, which happens to be great if you are gluten intolerant and you need an alternative to it. But this method apparently works with all kinds of grains. The recipe I'm going to be using today and testing out comes from Chef Steps, and they were inspired by George Lee, also known as Chef Jorge. Some of you sent me this video of George making this bread out of rice, and I said yes, and thank you so much for sending it to me and for reminding me to try this bread because it looks incredible, because we're taking a grain. In this case, we're using rice, but you could use quinoa, you can use wheat, any kind of grain you can adapt for this recipe. It comes together super quickly, and the trick to this recipe is using a high-speed blender. So if you have a blender that is not powerful enough to pulverize the grain into essentially flour, then this recipe will not work. So that is sort of the linchpin. You need a high-speed blender, and also you need to soak your grains overnight. Now, Chef Steps tested different methods. George, in his video, says that you can soak the rice for 2 hours with good results, but Chef Steps takes this a step further and tests different soaking times, and the overnight soaking had the best rise. Makes sense because the rice has enough time to absorb water so that the blender can pulverize it nice and fine so that you have more lift from your yeast. Now, the thing that really attracted me to this recipe was not only the fact that we're using whole grain rice to make bread, but also that you can make a yeasted bread in such a relatively short amount of time. If any of you have ever baked with yeast before, you know that usually they require some kind of rise time, especially with just your typical bread, oftentimes 2 rises to get that beautiful loaf. This has 1 rise, and it is for about 20 minutes. So start to finish, not including the soaking time, we can have bread in about an hour. And this is yeasted bread, not a quick bread that we use baking powder or baking soda to leaven it. So we'll get that great yeasty flavor. So super excited about lots of elements of this recipe. Number 1, the quick rise time. Number 2, pulverizing a grain and making it straight into bread. And 3, doing it all in the blender. You were just going to dump everything in and then pour it and then bake it, essentially. It couldn't be any simpler, I think, when it comes to making bread. This might be the simplest bread recipe I've ever made. I mean, we're making a batter. So if you count pancakes as a bread, then I guess I've done something like this before. But this is going to be a sliceable bread that we can actually make a sandwich with. So without much further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So as I said before, we're going to need a speedy, juicy, beefy blender. So I've got mine here. I've plugged it in and turned on the power cord. Now this is the rice that I have soaked overnight. This is jasmine rice, but you can use short grain rice, Texas long grain rice, any rice that you have. And I just soaked it overnight. We're going to drain the excess water. Because we can use any kind of grain here, I love the potential of experimentation for this recipe. Just using the basic proportions, we can experiment and get all different kinds of flavors of bread simply by just switching out the grain. Okay, now that that is drained, we're going to add the drained rice to the blender. So apparently, from what George says, this recipe actually has its origins from Asia, and he was inspired by Japanese and Taiwanese blogs. So this recipe actually isn't something new or novel, just new or novel to me. Some people use this water to water their plants and do other magical things with it. Some people I've heard wash their hair with it because there's some great stuff in the starches. So I'm going to be adding it to my plant beds. So set that aside. Then to this, we're gonna add some additional water. Oil, any kind of oil you like. Again, plenty of room for experimentation here, different flavors, just by swapping out the oil. Sugar, some salt, and most importantly, our yeast. Quite a bit. That's it. Alrighty, next we're just gonna blend this up. Now, one thing that people may not realize is that this motor is moving super fast. I'm sure you realize that part, but the part that you might not realize is that it creates a lot of friction. So this is gonna get quite warm. I'm gonna blend this for 1 minute to 1.5 minutes, probably not much more than that, because the temperature will then get too hot. If we get it to about 120 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, you begin to kill your yeast. So ideally we want the temperature to be about 95 degrees to about 110, but no higher than 110. So about 1 minute on high speed. So here we go. This part's gonna be a little loud. Start your engines. Oh, forgot to set my timer. I'm gonna do my little stopwatch and begin. Okay, that's 45 seconds and I'm gonna check its temperature. We are at 78 degrees. So we do want it warm enough so that it'll proof properly. So another 20 seconds or so on high speed. All right, here we go. All right, let's check it again. Look at this paste, quite a thick batter. Temperature, we are at 87. So still more. That was an additional 20 seconds. So total I have done about 1 minute and 15 seconds. 99 degrees, 100, perfect. Boop, 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 boop. That is it for the preparation of the batter. So simple, right? Easy. So I've got 2 mini loaf pans. So these measure approximately 3 inches by more like 5 3/4 of an inch. 2 of those, and we are going to spray them so that the bread doesn't stick. Divide the batter between the 2 pans as evenly as we can. Look how thick that is. That looks luscious. A rice kind of goop. It looks like marshmallow fluff or something. Lovely. Next, we're going to give these, ooh, nice, it's toasty. Wow, yes, definitely 100 degrees. Now we're going to give these some swift taps. It's gonna be a little bit noisy. I believe Grant calls this in the video liquefaction. That doesn't seem quite right. At any rate, we're gonna do the tappy taps so that this settles and, you know, follows all those nooks and crannies, like that. So, and then it'll be nice and even over the top. And now I've got some water and clean new spray bottle, and I'm going to spritz the top with water, and this will avoid any kind of drying on the surface of the batter, because then we will get a proper rise and we'll get some crackage. We're going to allow this to rest for about 15 to 20 minutes. It might be longer if you've got a colder room, but remember, we did heat up this batter in the blender. So after about 20 minutes, once this has risen to just underneath the rim of the baking pan. So one more thing, before we bake this, we're going to give the batters another spritz, place them in the oven, and then in the bottom of your oven, add a little bit of water to create a burst of steam. And then continue to bake 30 to 35 minutes at 365 degrees Fahrenheit, or until the internal temperature of the breads reach 205 to 210 degrees. Alrighty, my lovelies, I will see you when our lovely breads are baked. Bye! Alrighty, my lovelies, I am back with my finished blender rice breads, and they look totally adorable. I am slightly disappointed on the rise though. They don't look quite as puffed as Grant's. And I did notice when I watched his video again that their batter seemed to be a little bit runnier than mine, but I did follow the weight measurements. Alas, my kitchen smells great and they look quite cute. They remind me a little bit of mini kind of banana bread loaves. Still cute. And I checked the internal temperature and they measured 206 degrees, which is perfect. Alrighty, so bread slice is best when it's completely cooled. So I'm gonna let one loaf cool completely and the other one I'm gonna eat now, because I mean, fresh bread out of the oven is just irresistible, isn't it? So in Chef Sep's video, Grant just tears the bread in half and it seems a little bit barbaric, but these are so cute. It just seems just so tempting to do that. And I want to try that. So, alrighty, we're going to be barbarians and just tear the bread. And look at that. It's bread. We got bread. Amazing. Look at that. Look at that crumb structure. That looks like bread. And it smells great too. Nice and yeasty and slightly tangy. Let's give it a taste. I should really try this with butter, but I'm not going to. And let's, look at that. Beautiful. Alrighty, blender bread. We're gonna give this a taste. Itadakimasu. Well seasoned, definitely enough salt. I can taste the yeast. It has a slightly gummier texture. Gummy is a great way to describe it, although it doesn't sound that attractive. It's a pleasant texture. It's just not the same texture as wheat gluten. It's not chewy in that same way. This, of course, is right out of the oven, so it's hot, but it is kind of a wetter consistency, even though the crumb is beautiful. Look at that crumb. It's absolutely gorgeous. Fluffy, beautifully cooked, and tender. Definitely enough salt in that. And the outside of the bread has a pleasant kind of crispness to it. Hear that? But if you're gluten intolerant or just want to avoid wheat, this is a great option. Not only that, you can experiment with all different kinds of grains. It comes together super fast. And you can have bread on the table in an hour. And we're talking yeasted bread. So that's pretty impressive. So I use 2 mini loaf pans, but the recipe says you can also make 1 large loaf if you like. I like the idea of making smaller ones. I would imagine that reduces the baking time by a bit. And yeah, fun little experiment, totally works. It doesn't taste exactly like wheat bread because it's made with rice, but as an alternative to wheat, I think it's a really good one. And by the way, because I know somebody will ask, I get my glasses from glassesusa.com, and I'll include a link in the description box. All right, my lovelies, there you have it, blender rice bread. It totally works. The results are pretty tasty, especially if you're looking for a gluten-free alternative. And I don't think I've ever made a yeasted bread recipe any faster than this one. All right, my lovelies. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that one. I hope you learned something. Please share this video with your friends. Follow me on social media. I love hearing from you. This one was a suggested recipe. And like this video, subscribe, and I shall see you in the next one. Toodaloo. Take care. Bye. Bread time. So I've got 2 mini loaf pans.